July 27, 2002, Lviv, Ukraine. Thousands eyes fixed on the sky, cameras ready to capture history, but the air show that was supposed to be a celebration turned into a horrible tragedy. This is the story of Sknyliv air show disaster. On the warm summer morning of July 27, 2002, thousands of aviation enthusiasts, families and military personnel gathered at Lviv airfield in Ukraine, eager to witness a breathtaking display of aerial courage. The occasion was meant to be a grand celebration, an air show marking the anniversary of the 14th Air Corps, one of Ukraine's most prestigious military aviation units. The Ukrainian military had pulled out all the stops, promising an awe-inspiring spectacle featuring the legendary Su-27, a cutting-edge fighter jet renowned for its power, agility and ability to execute dazzling aerobatic maneuvers. The crowd hummed with excitement as the event got underway. Children perched on their parents' shoulders, eyes wide with anticipation. Veterans and active-duty military personnel watched with admiration, reliving the thrill of flight through the roaring engines above. The star pilots of the event, Volodymyr Toponar and Yuri Yegorov, were among the most experienced aviators in the Ukrainian Air Force. Toponar in particular had over 27 years of flight experience, making him one of the most seasoned pilots in the service. They were set to showcase a series of advanced maneuvers, including the infamous Pugachev's Cobra, a high-risk aerobatic stunt where the jet rears back nearly vertical before swiftly leveling out again. The audience expected a show of discipline, precision and mastery of flight. But beneath the surface of the festivities, cracks were already forming. In the days leading up to the much-anticipated air show, Toponar, the pilot scheduled to perform in the event, had requested to conduct several practice flights at Lviv airfield. His aim was to familiarize himself with the local terrain along with the unique flight parameters that would be required for his performance during the show. These rehearsals were seen as essential for ensuring the smooth execution of his aerial maneuvers, especially given the complexity of the display and the need to navigate over potentially hazardous ground. However, the request was swiftly denied by officials from the Ukrainian Air Force. Citing ongoing financial constraints, the military explained that it could not allocate additional resources to support such training. The Air Force emphasized that the show had already been meticulously planned, relying on high-grade intelligence and reconnaissance data to map out every aspect of the aerial performance. The officials reassured Toponar that the detailed reconnaissance information, including the layout of the terrain and any potential obstacles, was more than sufficient for a successful demonstration, and they downplayed the necessity of extra rehearsals. For a seasoned pilot like Toponar, operating in unfamiliar territory was not unheard of. In military combat, pilots often have to adapt to new environments on the fly. However, flying a high-speed jet in an air show packed with civilians required absolute precision. Some local pilots who were familiar with the site voiced their concerns, describing the event's planning as disorganized and unsafe. One pilot even withdrew from the event, citing the poor level of preparation. Despite these warnings, the show moved forward. On the day of the performance, a last-minute change in venue further complicated matters. Organizers abruptly shifted the show's location from one side of the airfield to the other, moving designated spectator zones in the process. This crucial information was not communicated to Toponar and Yegorov. As they prepared for takeoff, they were unaware that their planned trajectory no longer matched the new layout of the event. Despite the confusion, the pilots pressed on with their performance. The Su-27 took to the skies, executing a series of fabulous maneuvers that left the crowd in awe. The audience cheered as the jet soared, twisted and rolled with breathtaking precision. However, as Toponar and Yegorov prepared for their final routine, they quickly realized something was wrong. As they approached Lviv airfield to begin their last sequence of stunts, they attempted to verify their position relatively to the crowd. To their shock, they couldn't see the audience from the cockpit. They had expected the spectators to be in a specific location based on their briefing, but the changes to the event layout meant the crowd was now positioned on the opposite side of the aircraft. This critical error meant their intended flight path could bring them dangerously close to civilians. To make matters worse, the flight parameters they had been given did not align with the actual terrain beneath them. Buildings, trees and obstacles were not where they had expected them to be. Under mounting pressure to complete the routine, Topana contacted air traffic control for guidance. Instead of advising them to abort or modify their flight path, air traffic controllers instructed them to proceed as planned. Military pilots are trained to follow orders without hesitation. Despite the glaring safety concerns, they complied. The Su-27 initiated a half-barrel roll at a low altitude, a maneuver requiring precise control over speed and trajectory. As the jet transitioned into a loop, Topana noticed something alarming. Both engines had reduced thrust. This sudden loss of power caused the aircraft to lose airspeed, making it more difficult to complete the maneuver safely. Flying at just 200 meters above the ground, the pilots attempted to regain speed and altitude. The aircraft pulled up, but now was headed directly toward the audience. With only seconds to react, Topana struggled to adjust the plane's trajectory, trying desperately to avoid disaster. As the aircraft descended, its left wing clipped a tree branch. The impact caused the jet to veer slightly off course, but for a brief moment it appeared as though pilots might recover. The wingtip then struck the concrete, briefly stabilizing the plane at an impossibly low altitude. But by then it was too late. The Su-27 hurtled toward a parked transport aircraft, leaving the pilot with no choice but to eject. Yegorov pulled up the ejection handle, and both men were launched from the cockpit moments before the jet crashed. The fighter jet slammed into a parked plane, igniting a massive fireball and sending debris flying in all directions. The explosion sent the aircraft cartwheeling across the airfield before it plowed into the crowd at high speed. The force of the impact sent wreckage, shrapnel and flaming jet fuel scattering among the panicked spectators. A barbed wire fence was dragged along the asphalt, creating a horrific net of destruction. In the moments following the crash, the airfield was unrecognizable. Survivors screamed for missing loved ones, and the smell of burning fuel filled the air. The scenes of devastation were so overwhelming that some people walked away in a daze, unable to process what had just happened. Among the spectators was a veteran pilot who had come to enjoy the show with his wife and 3 children. After the crash, he left the airfield with only his 2 surviving sons. In total, 77 people lost their lives that day, including 28 children. Over 500 others were injured, many suffering severe burns and life-changing injuries. The tragedy remains the deadliest air show disaster in history. Topanar and Yegorov, despite ejecting safely, were immediately taken into custody. In the days that followed, public outrage grew as the details of the disaster came to light. The Ukrainian president vowed swift action, and an investigation was launched into the causes of the crash. Authorities found that a mix of poor planning, communication failures and procedural negligence had created the conditions for the catastrophe. Topanar was ultimately sentenced to 14 years in prison, while Yegorov received an 8-year sentence. Several high-ranking military officials also faced legal repercussions. The Sknyliv airshow disaster stands as a grim reminder of the importance of meticulous planning and safety in aviation events. The combination of a disorganized airshow, last-minute changes and communication breakdowns led to a preventable catastrophe. Today it serves as a case study in aviation safety, reinforcing the critical need for stringent regulations and thorough risk assessments when conducting high-risk aerial displays. For the families who lost loved ones, no amount of justice or safety reforms can erase the pain of that day. The memory of the Sknyliv tragedy remains a somber chapter in aviation history. Moments when human error and systemic failure turned a celebration into an unimaginable nightmare.